Welcome back to Honoring the Journey. I'm Leslie Neese, your host on another adventure. Today's going to be a little different. And I don't know, I've just been having so much fun doing different things lately. So this one actually fits right into that category. Keith Giles is back with us. And if you're like somebody who's been listening since the beginning of the podcast, you heard his journey back in episode 5. And really, really powerful story that he's got. And I loved it. I actually really love him. He's a good friend. And he and my friend Matthew Distefano are coming out with, well, they just came out with a couple weeks ago, a new book called Reading Romans Right. And so I was like, Keith, will you just come on the show and talk about this? Because I don't know, Keith, lately, I don't know if you've been listening to my podcast, but like, not only do I share journeys, but lately I've been like finding out other things about my guests and having them come back and talk about it because
Oh, cool.
it's fascinating.
Hmm.
And I feel like this is something I was so passionate about when I was an evangelical was the Bible
Yeah,
and Romans. And,
yeah,
specifically, I know there's a verse in there that, the warriors like to break out when it comes to homosexuality. All
yes,
the things that as an evangelist, sorry, and a apologetics person,
yeah,
Romans was sort of my go-to.
yep.
And I'm learning so much about the Bible and how different it is than I thought. And I'm making kind of room for that in my life, which I think I would have been afraid to do before. So
Yeah.
I am so excited to talk about this with you today. Thank you for coming back and joining us today.
Oh, Leslie, thank you for inviting me back. I love the opportunity to just to talk to you again. We talked for a long time before we hit record. We have no trouble talking about stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely not one of our hangups. We
Yes.
we definitely know how to have a conversation. I
Yeah.
was like, we better push record.
At some
Yeah,
point here. Yeah.
yeah. But okay, so before we do that though, like it's been about a year since
Mhm.
we had our first conversation here on Honoring the Journey. How has your year been? I know you guys had just started with
Mhm.
Quoir not too long before.
Yep.
How has it been at Quoir Public? Well, Quoir. I'll say Quoir, but there's a publishing and
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Tell me all the branches you have now.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's going very well. I would say. Yeah, we have Quoir Publishing, which Matthew Distefano and I took over from Raphael Polendo. We were just published authors with Quoir, and he wanted to step away. He handed the company to us, and yeah, since then it's been really great. Matt and I work together really well. He does all the stuff I don't want to do. I do all the stuff he doesn't want to do, and we've signed some really great authors and published some really great books. I'm really proud of, and we have new ones coming this year that I'm also very very excited to put
Sweet.
out and publish. So it's just really fun to, in addition to writing my own books as an author, because still trying to be an author at the same time. It also is very satisfying when you meet an author, you see their passion for their book, and you get to help them realize the dream of bringing it into the world and
Yeah,
sharing it with the world. Like that's really satisfying.
I
I
bet.
love getting to do that. Yeah, but we also have Matt and I have also expanded Quoir beyond the publishing side. So there is the Quoircast podcast network. I think that's the first thing we did.
Yep, I'm in that, by the
Yeah,
way.
and you're on the network. Yes.
Yes.
So
And
you
I'm
hear
an
the little
author.
this. Yeah, and you're also an author. That's right.
Yes, I
Yeah.
am.
So we have a podcast network. I think it's like 20 something podcasts now on the network. And
Nice.
again, a lot of great podcasts that are on the network. The goal is just for us to help promote each other and, rising tide, lift all boats kind of a thing. So that's been really good. And that gives us an opportunity to also run some ads on all those podcasts to help promote our authors, right?
Hmm.
So that's been great. We also have something called Quoir Academy that we started, and that's gone okay. I think
Yeah,
we're still trying to find, because it's a totally different kind of business unit. So
yeah.
like creating online courses for people on various topics, and expanding that roster even just beyond our authors.
Hmm.
So we've really gotten some really great instructors. I go check that out, quoiracademy.com. We've got some really great courses there. And then we're working on something now. We have another
Woohoo.
project.
Ooh,
Um,
do tell.
it is called The Collective.
Okay.
and it's going to be, how can I say? It's going to be like an online magazine / news platform, resource platform. We're again, right now we're assembling a whole bunch of different people, theologians, poets, writers, people that write essays or all kinds of stuff. And we're going to cover a variety of topics like politics, the arts, lots of different things, as well as, of course, faith, things
Right.
like
Yeah.
that. So, and it's hard to compare it to something like it's sort of like Patheos, but not really, and sort of like Huffington Post, but better.
Hmm.
But something we want to kind of expand Quoir into that realm, and we've got some great contributors already lined up.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah, once we get that launched, I think people will like that, and hopefully that'll be later this year.
So
So
basically, you're giving people voices.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
and that's one of our little things, right? Many voices, one
Yeah.
message. So
Hmm.
that many voices part of our mission or our vision is it's just another way to kind of give those voices a platform and
Hmm.
promote them and let them say what they need to say.
Love it. Well, that's exciting. It sounds like it's definitely going well then at Choir. I know it's always so scary when you start something out.
Yeah,
So I'm really happy that you guys are doing so well. And I've
yeah,
enjoyed being a part of it. I've written, um, Honoring the Journey was my third book that I've written. The first two I went self-publishing just because you know,
yeah.
I couldn't, I just wanted to get it done. And I was like, here we go. But it was so complicated and so difficult, and it took me forever.
Yeah.
But when I worked with you guys, you were so good at helping me like figure out what to do next. And it was so seamless. I was like,
Mm.
dang, I think I'll write another book. So here
Yeah.
I go. I'm writing another book because it
Thank you.
really was so nice to be able to just have that support and
Yeah.
encouragement. And you write a chapter and I sometimes would just send it in to either you or Matthew and say, I don't know, what do you think? And,
Yeah.
getting that feedback and having somebody just listen,
Yes.
and
Yes.
encourage me. It was great, because
Mhm.
I didn't feel that at all with self-publishing at
Well, yeah.
all.
Yeah. And see, I'm the same way. First of all, thank you I love to hear that, Leslie, because that's kind
Yeah.
of that's our hope,
It's your dream and you're doing
Yeah.
it. Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, because I was self-published. I self-published, I think, 6 books before as an author, I came to Quoir. And in fact, when I met with Raphael Polendo the first time about publishing my book, Jesus Untangled, with Quoir, fully intending I was going to self-publish it. He invited me to lunch, and I thought, hey, if nothing else, to get a free lunch out of this. But I was totally intending to say no. I'm just gonna self-publish. But he convinced me to at least try it.
Hmm.
And man, after I published that first book with them, I was like, I never want to publish. I never want to self-publish ever
No,
again
it was such
because
a nightmare.
he made it so simple. He made it so enjoyable.
Hmm.
Literally all I had to do was focus on writing the book.
Yeah,
And once I handed it to him, he did everything else.
which
And he
was
did a wonderful
amazing.
job of it. And it gave me so much confidence to feel like I had a publisher. And it wasn't just a company over there that publishes me. It was like,
Right.
it was like a friend, someone that cared
Hmm.
about what I was working on,
You
that
guys
pitched me
mentored me through it.
ideas. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And
So
then to have this automatic sort of family,
mhm,
being a part of the Choir family is just so great. I've
yeah,
met so many amazing people, either through podcasting or authors that I've interviewed. And I mean, I've made some really great friends.
yeah.
So, yeah, it's definitely cool. And I think what's even more exciting for me is, being in this sort of messy middle
Mhm,
deconstruction, it
yeah.
can be hard to find people to connect with. And so, yeah, it was kind of baked into that. And I appreciate that about what you guys do. So,
Yeah, thank you. Well,
yeah, of
that's our goal.
course.
That's what we want to do is want to, it's by authors for authors and very author centric. So
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
and that's my job. That's the part that I love to do. Like I'm sort of the author liaison guy. So I
Yeah,
get to talk to the authors, talk about their book, walk them through the process, help them market and promote and all that kind of stuff, and think about the next
beautiful.
book they're going to work on and all that. So
Hmm.
I love that.
Yeah, excellent. Well, okay, so that brings me to this new book that you have because I really want to get into this. the people who listen to my podcast know I'm like obsessed with theology. I love it. I think it's
Mhm.
so fun, especially now that I see things from a different lens, let's just
Mhm.
say, than I
Yeah.
used to. I think a lot of the theology that I had before was a little frightening, a little overwhelming, very legalistic, very scary. And
Yes.
now I feel this freedom to go, what if? And to ask questions and to get a
Yeah.
little deeper and to understand why certain books were written. I want to understand though, Keith. This is my first question.
Okay.
Why did you say I need to write a book about how to read Romans right? Were people reading it wrong?
Oh, were they? Yes. Oh my gosh, they were. Well, yeah, and I know that partially because I was taught as a young person to
Mhm.
read it the wrong way myself, right?
Right.
And it just took a long time as I went through my own deconstruction, well, even part of my deconstruction process, figuring out that Romans wasn't what I was told it was, and some of that was reading it and studying it by myself, just like what is it saying, what is Paul doing, and then of course coming across other biblical scholars and other like progressive Bible teachers who just pointed out things I was completely missing. And so, yeah, I really, and again, I co-wrote this book with Matthew Distefano. I think the genesis of the book was he and I were just talking about Romans and how it is so misunderstood and mistaught.
And
Um,
weaponized.
yeah,
Yeah.
weaponized against groups of people. Like,
Hmm.
so, we were both like, yeah, somebody needs to write a book about Romans and correct all of these things because, like, Paul's epistle to the Romans for the longest time has been used to justify misogyny, homophobia, the ideas of predestination, reformed theology and eternal conscious torment, God being creating vessels for wrath, for destruction, and of course blind allegiance to the state, like Romans 13.
Yeah.
Romans is, I would say, certainly of Paul's letters, it's his most significant one. Like
Yeah,
if you could only pick one, most
absolutely.
evangelical Christians are basing a whole lot of their theology on what they think
Right.
Paul is saying in Romans. So we felt like we were just tired of seeing it misused, misquoted, and wanted to write a book that kind of hopefully uh, clears the air and presents Romans from a perspective that most evangelical Christians are never going to hear from the pulpit. They're never going to hear this from their Bible teachers, but they need to know because a whole lot of scholarship is out there and has been out there for probably like 50 years that they have never even heard about.
Well, and see, that is such a good point. But my issue, I know from when I was in it and like just the reaction that people give to me about some of the things that I say. I mean, even if they were told you might be reading it wrong, you've been tuned out then. Like they
That's right.
don't want to hear it. So I
Yeah.
think the key is, and I'm realizing this more and more, the key is they're probably not going to pick this book up. I'm sure they'll have a few things to say about it, just like they do about deconstruction when they haven't actually had an
Yes, of
experience
course.
with it.
Yeah.
But until you read it, like,
Mhm.
like I would just recommend you know, don't make the judgments until you read it. And I
Yeah.
think the fear of trying to figure things out and listening to different perspectives keeps people in so much bondage. And so, but like, how are you preparing yourself for that? Because it's gonna, I mean, Keith, this is not the first book you've written that I'm
Of course.
sure,
Yeah.
will make an impact. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
So how are you preparing for that?
Well, let me say, not only are we preparing for this, we're actually planning it because
Because
we put we put together a book launch team. I think we had like 40 something people on our launch team,
Uh-huh.
and it was close to 50, like closer to 50 people on our launch team. And normally, when we launch a book, we have 4 steps we ask people on the team to do. Right, read an advance copy, buy it on launch day, leave a rating and review, and share the link on your personal social media channels. Right, that's kind of the typical
Yeah.
4-step. By the way, free advice. That's what we
Yeah.
do. That's our secret sauce.
Yeah,
But
but
we
they
had
have
it.
to participate. Like I had a
They have
launch
to
team
do
and I
it.
think 3
Yeah,
people shared the link. Most people were like, I really loved it, but I don't want people to know this is where I'm at.
that's right. No,
And
I
I'm
know
like,
that, and that is always the problem.
I
Getting
get it. I understand
Yeah,
it, but dang
yeah,
it.
Yeah, and that is always the problem. So we try to vet as much as possible. But
Yeah.
what I've done is to try to, because I've done this several times, right? This is like my 12th book, I think, with Quoir. Um, I try to go and because I keep a spreadsheet of everybody on my previous teams, and I mark down if they did the steps. And so now I only
Yes.
invite
Yeah.
people from the previous ones who actually did the steps.
Oh,
I don't invite
nice.
people that didn't do it, right? So anyway, but we've added a fifth step for this book launch team, and step 5 is we're going to give YouTube links and website links and social media links to like the Gospel Coalition and Alyssa Childers and Mike Winger and Sean McDowell, and really targeting. These are the kind of influencers that are already out there that have huge followings, that are telling you this is how to read Romans, that we think are telling you this is the wrong way to read Romans. And we want them to go and leave comments on their videos, comments on their social media, and say, hey, what about what Keith and Matt say in this book, Reading Romans? Or can you answer this question? Can you answer that question? Or what about this? Or what about that? And then to not be annoying and not be, we're not trying to pick a fight.
No,
But we are trying to bring it to their attention and try to get some kind of a response from them.
Right.
So that's a huge part of kind of
good.
the plan for the book. So we're hoping we're going to get, I would love for someone at the Gospel Coalition to review this book. That's my dream, if they would actually, hopefully read the book and then respond to each of the chapters in the book, each of the points that we're making, each of the arguments that we're presenting. Because again, Matthew and I, we're not like big time scholars or anything, right? So we're not saying this like we came up with this. We're quoting people that really are big time biblical scholars, New Testament scholars, Pauline scholars, people like Douglas Campbell, David Bentley Hart, Lucy Pepiot, Christopher Tilling, lots of people like this. Even N.T. Wright, who doesn't probably agree with everything we're saying in the book, but there are certain points that N.T. Wright brings out in some of his scholarship that does contradict some of the stuff. So yeah, like
I love that. I think that's important. We have to see it from every angle.
That's right.
It's like, it's kind of like, honestly, Keith, this is reminding me of a trial. You've got the defense and the prosecution, and you're going to hear two sides. Like some people are going to be like, no, I totally agree. This is the wrong way to read it. And some people are going to say, no, reading it this way feels right to me. There's going to be some tension there.
Yes.
But like I am trying so hard. My message, I think, in what I write, in the podcast, everything I do is listen.
Yes.
Please just listen. Just listen. And that means either reading or, podcasts or books, whatever it is, like absorb different perspectives. Because if you're only doing one perspective all the time, you're never gonna grow. I mean, you may feel like you're faithful, but is it faithful to be on one road and never even consider that maybe I might not be on the right road?
Right.
And how do you know if you don't listen?
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, I agree. I think, you at some point, hopefully in your faith journey, you have to reach a point where you recognize that if you're always only sitting in a room with people that agree with you on everything, or you're only surrounding yourself with teachers who always reinforce everything you already believe, and you only read books by people that you already agree with, what you're going to do is stay exactly where you are. If that's your goal, then great. That's how to do that. That's how to accomplish
stay right there. You won't move.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you want to grow and mature, right, then you have to challenge yourself. And the only way you're going to grow is to listen to people that maybe you don't necessarily agree with, or who don't agree with you. Right. This was a big thing I learned. When I went to college, I did not go to a Christian college. I went to the University of Texas at El Paso. I was a creative writing major with a philosophy minor. And I remember my freshman year philosophy 101 class, and I got so angry in that class, day one, with the philosophy professor. Everyone called him the Antichrist. Dr. Springer. His name was Dr. Springer. And he was on purpose. I found out later, I figured it wasn't an accident.
He was just brilliant.
Yeah. But his plan on day one was to try to get people angry and to drop his class, because he didn't want you in there if you weren't open to him challenging your ideas, your beliefs, right? And I nearly walked out, but then it was like this little voice in my head, maybe the Holy Spirit said, Keith, you could, because I was just going to throw my book down and tell him off and drop the class. Right. And the Holy Spirit said, you could do that and you'd feel like $1 million, but you wouldn't really know what people who don't agree with you think about what you believe.
Right.
But if you sit down and you listen and you sit through the class, if nothing else, you'll understand why some people don't believe what you believe, why some people reject your beliefs.
Oof.
And that might be worth it. Like, seriously.
It's very humbling.
Yeah.
It's
And I
very
was kind of like,
humbling.
oh, maybe I should do that. And I'm so glad I did.
Do you know how rare that is, Keith? Like most people don't want to be challenged. They
Yeah.
just want to be right. I don't know
Yeah.
if we see a little bit of that in the United States right now, but
That's exactly right.
it's just
Mhm.
very, to me, just it's hard for me to connect with somebody who is not listening to me to understand, but is listening to me to defend or,
Yeah.
and to me, I feel like truth really doesn't need like an army behind it trying to defend it. It just
Yeah.
is.
That's
And
exactly right.
so, I don't know that I love that you've written this book. Tell me, okay. Oh, now we get to the good stuff.
Okay.
So give me an example. Just
Yes.
one. I know we got to save some of it so they can go get the book, but
Sure. Okay.
give me
I
an
will.
example of something that people have read wrong in your opinion and
Yes.
from what you've researched,
Yes.
and what it looks like to actually read it the right way.
Okay. I'm glad you asked me this because, of course, I knew you were going to ask me this, but this really is one of the things that one of the reasons why I so wanted to write this book. And this is just one of the things in the book, but this is one of the first things we address. The thing that most people get wrong about the book of Romans, and the reason why the majority of Bible teachers today misunderstand what's really happening in in Romans, is because they don't understand they don't understand the style of argumentation that Paul is using in Romans. Okay. So there's something, and I did not know this. Again, someone told me this, I think like 6 or 7 years ago, and it blew my mind. What's happening in the book of Romans is that Paul is writing for almost about half of the book, the first up until like chapter, I think 9 or 10. He's using an argumentation technique. It was a well-known technique from the first century. We can document this. Other philosophers and theologians and people would write this way, using what's called prosopopoeia. And prosopopoeia is an argumentation technique where you want to make a point, okay? But to make the point, you're wanting to you want to show the flaws in your opponent's arguments, people that don't agree with you. You want to point out their wrong way of thinking. And so what you do is you have a back and forth conversation, right?
With
So
yourself or with
so like
okay.
so one side is you and the other side is your opponent. So the easiest way to think of it in Romans would be, because I think this is almost exactly what's happening in Paul's mind when he's writing Romans. His opponent would be someone like Saul of Tarsus, who was a Pharisee of Pharisees, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he knows that guy because he was that guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
He knows exactly what someone raised in that and indoctrinated in that way of thinking, how they would respond to the idea of his what he has now come to believe, which is this idea that God is very different than what he was told, right? That God is that the Father that's revealed through Jesus is not the way we think. So it's a back and forth dialogue between
with his old self.
Yes, with Saul of Tarsus, the Pharisee of Pharisees, and Paul the Apostle, who now has embraced this idea of the gospel of grace. And
Keith,
if you
that's
don't
crazy.
know that,
I've already had an aha moment.
Yeah.
Like already.
Yeah.
Because I was just thinking the other day, like if somebody were to say something to me now, I could tell you verbatim what I
Yes.
would have said back then
You already
and
know.
how different it is now. Like it would, and I would literally have to play it out of my mind and get it out of there before the real me is
Yes.
allowed to answer because she's still there.
Yes.
She's
Oh, yeah.
still, I know exactly what people are going to say.
That's right.
But just because it's a thought of who I used to be doesn't mean it's how I see it now. So
Yes.
you're saying that that's kind of his
That's right.
style. So give
That's
me an
right.
example of that. When did he do that?
Well, he's doing that like really between the first chapter and the second chapter is probably the first example of it.
Okay.
All of chapter 1, I should say also, the reason why so many evangelical, the Gospel Coalition guys, the kind of Theo bros, the reason why they love Romans so much, sadly, is their favorite parts are when Paul is talking like Saul of Tarsus. That's the stuff they end up quoting, right? All the condemnation,
Right.
all the wrath, all the judgment. Like, yes, Paul does say that in Romans, but if you don't know that this is a dialogue and a debate, then you're not paying attention to like how he will contradict that or answer that a few chapters later. Okay.
Wow.
So because you kind of take it only in chunks, right? Only
So
in
they
parts.
knew to read it like this then. They
Yes,
knew that's what, but like as time has gone, we've kind of lost sight of
we've
that.
lost the understanding of that back and forth. Yeah. The other thing is when Paul wrote Romans, we have to understand again the context of it. He had never been to Rome. He'd never been to the church in Rome. Okay. When he wrote to like Galatia, the church in Galatia or Corinth, he had been there. He had visited those churches. Some of them he planted those churches, right? He spent time with them and they knew him personally very well. The church in Rome does not know him. He's never been there. He's never visited those churches. But he is aware that there are some false teachers going around teaching things that he wants to correct. Now he's doing that in Galatians. He's doing that in some of his other books as well. So, Paul writes this letter to this church he's never visited before. And he has it hand delivered by Phoebe, a woman. And she stands up. So when she gets to Rome and gets in front of these churches, she stands up and she's reading it. Okay. So it's really performed. It's acted out. And so she knows Paul. Paul has told her what the book, the letter is about, the point he wants to make and the way he wants to make the point. So, I mean, Phoebe is doing the voices, right? She's reading this part in the teacher of the law voice, and then she's changing and reading the next part in the voice of Paul the apostle. This is the point Paul wants to make because she understands she's speaking for Paul because he's never been there, right?
How do you know this? How do you know this?
Well, we know in the book of Romans, Paul says that he's giving it that she's the one delivering the letter. And we know this was the practice that people would stand up like the church in Ephesus, the church in Galatia, the church in Corinth. People would stand up and read these letters out loud. Because they couldn't make a copy, they didn't have photocopy machines, right? There's just this one copy. So the only way for everyone in the church to hear it is for someone to stand up and read it. So, but we know in Romans that it was Phoebe who stood up and read it. Again, a woman.
Interesting. I thought we weren't allowed to speak. Sorry.
Yeah, well, we talk about that too. That's another thing we touch on. But
did Phoebe actually read those words out loud?
Yes, she did. And so I think the thing that's amazing too is you asked about the examples, right? So Paul starts off the letter, chapter 1, and that it's kind of a trick. It's like a gotcha, right? They think chapter 1, oh, okay, this is a letter from Paul, and he's talking. And actually, everything he's saying, what he's doing is he's trying to get them worked up, right? So what is he talking about? Those pagans. Those awful people. Oh, those sinners. Oh, and then, we don't like them. Oh, they're horrible. Yes. And they're getting all upset. And they do these horrible things when they worship their gods, right, in the temple. Oh, these horrible things that they do. It's awful. It's disgusting. We can't even talk about it. It's so awful. And so they're like, this Paul guy. Yeah, we like him. He's great.
Get this. Yeah.
Oh, he's one of us. And then, again, first of all, understand there are no chapter breaks. So it's just like, it just goes straight from the end of chapter 1 into chapter 2, which then says, and by the way, if you're condemning those people that I just talked about, you're condemned too, because you are also someone who breaks the law. Yeah. So immediately it sets the tone of, oh, wait a minute, here it comes. Some of this is going to be.
They were shifting in their seats.
They're shifting. And also they're noticing the shifting in the voices. Yeah. Oh, now this is the voice of Paul. Now Paul is sort of rebuking us for judging and hating and coming against these other people as those people, recognizing how, we've condemned ourselves by behaving this way. So now when Paul goes back and forth, they're like, okay, I get it. This is like the first voice. Okay, now this is the second voice. And again, it carries through all the way to kind of the climax of what he's trying to say in Romans, kind of climaxes at the end of chapter 11. And then everything after that is sort of dealing with sort of the so what or the now what. and answering a couple of issues that he knew they were struggling with in that particular church about, like, do we eat meat sacrificed to idols or not, and that kind of thing.
Interesting. Wow. I love this. So it was very theatrical. It was very it sounds to me like he kind of knew what he was up against.
Oh, yes.
And
That's
so
why he had to write the letter. Yeah.
yeah, it's like how do you catch their attention? Well, say what they want to hear.
Yeah.
But then
Exactly. Yeah,
but
they think, oh,
then
he's one of us. He's on our team. And then it's suddenly like, well, actually,
how
you
was
know,
it received? Do you know? Is there any
I have
word of
no
that?
idea.
They don't, yeah, I
Well, they didn't
wonder.
burn it, so I guess
No, clearly they put it in the
it
canon,
lasted a
but
good long time.
wow,
Um,
that's interesting.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, it's very interesting. And so again, this is one of these things where if you don't understand what's going on in Paul, I mean, you're kind of, you're kind of doomed that you're
It's
going to misunderstand it.
interesting because I've always considered him to be not legalistic, and yet some of the things, some of the verses in the books sound like they are. And I've
Yeah,
always had a hard time, like, so which is it? But like if
right.
he was really just saying, this is what I used to say,
Yes,
we
that's
we just communicate different now. But
yes,
isn't that interesting, Keith? Because I think there's a lot of things in the Bible that were communicated way different than the way we do now that we look at
yeah,
as like, oh, that's what that means, but
yeah.
really not so much.
No, that's the problem with the Bible in general. I mean, there's just a whole bunch of things like that. Like, just one that comes to mind is First Corinthians. First Corinthians is similar to Romans in that there's a bit of a back and forth going on. But in the case of First Corinthians, what's happening, and the clues are there if you read it and you read carefully, Paul tells you what we're calling the First Corinthians, the first letter to the Corinthians, is actually the third letter, because he wrote them another letter we don't have. And then they wrote a letter back to him with a bunch of responses and questions. And then what we have is First Corinthians, what we're
His
calling First
answer
Corinthians is actually his answer to
to their
their letter.
questions.
Okay. And
Okay.
so now what we're noticing, so again, you've got to understand that, keep that in your mind as you're reading First Corinthians. Then when you're coming across parts of First Corinthians that sound either legalistic or misogynist, right? Anti-women or things like that. Pay attention to what comes after that, because usually what's happening is Paul is quoting parts of their letter that they wrote to him back to them, and then answering it like you asked me, or you said da 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 da, and then okay, here's my answer to that, or my response to that. And if you're not aware, if you don't keep in mind this is a response letter, and he's answering these questions one at a time, then you're not, and he's quoting bits of it to remind them, like you said this, okay. But again, it's also a private letter. Paul isn't writing this thinking, oh, in 2025, some people in this country that hasn't been discovered are going to translate this into a language I've never read, and they're going to call this the Bible, and they're going to live their lives by what I say to these people in this little private letter, right? He's just writing a letter to them. It's just between him and them. So he doesn't have to do a lot of like, oh, I need to make sure everyone's going to understand this 2,000 years later.
Right.
Obviously, they understood it. They wrote the letter, right?
Wow. This is mind blowing. I love it.
Yeah. So this kind of thing is,
it
something
is
that
interesting to me that this Bible that had me believing a certain theology for so long, that had me afraid for so long, that had me literally studying apologetics and witnessing on the airplane and giving out Bibles to people. And I'm sure getting on a lot of nerves, with all of my zeal. That same exact Bible gives me the complete opposite message when I read it through a lens of love.
That's right.
And not from a lens of fear.
Yeah.
And I, I'm kind of to the point where I'm like, okay, unless it's the words of Jesus, which I know they were all written by men. Like I know that maybe they're wrong about these words, but here's the thing I know. The words of Jesus make the most sense to my heart. So even if Jesus was never around, which I don't believe that's true, but if it is, okay, I'll give you that if you're somebody who's a skeptic about all of it, okay? Fully understand what you're saying. But even if it's made up, his life is how I want to live mine.
That's right.
And that I've really just come to that. And I'm like, and if his life and the way he lived his life doesn't line up with the way other verses have been interpreted, I'm going to choose the way of Christ.
Thank you. That's right. Yeah.
I'm just going to do that.
Yeah, I remember
And
one time, Bart Ehrman is like a very famous, scholar who's also now an atheist. And we interviewed him for Heretic Happy Hour years ago. And we were talking about this kind of thing. And I said to him, I said, if Jesus didn't exist, um, somebody wrote the Sermon on the Mount. So whoever that guy is, I think he's worth listening to. Like, it's a pretty
emulate
amazing.
that
Yeah.
because that makes
I mean,
sense to my
that right
soul.
there. Yeah. Those red letters, especially the Sermon on the Mount. And it's so beautiful. It's so counterintuitive. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the kind of thing that's natural to us. You know what I mean? Like, it's truly spiritual in the sense of like the ideas of loving your enemy and loving your neighbor, and like making it so simple as like, loving God and loving others. And like, it's so beautiful and
And it
and
makes sense even these
powerful.
many years later.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
People are,
almost as if Jesus knew
yeah,
in 2025 we would be reading these words. And he's
yeah,
like, don't get anything else,
yes.
don't look at anything else and think, that's why he always said, you've heard it said this, but I tell
What
you
I say to you.
this.
That's right.
Yeah. And I just love that. And I
Yeah,
think that to me is love, the way he
yeah,
lived his life. And so I'm just going to lean into love. Whereas before, I think I was trying to do that, but I was too afraid to
yeah.
because I was afraid people would go to hell if they didn't believe exactly the way I did.
That's
And when
exactly
you've
right.
got that fear, it's very difficult. And, Romans was all part of that, the Romans road. I mean, do you guys
Yeah.
discuss this in your book? Because that's
Yeah.
interesting.
The Romans Road. Yeah. The thing about the Romans Road, I don't think we cover it. We mention it, but we don't cover it
Handpicked
specifically.
verses.
Yeah. That is the problem with Romans is
Yeah.
that um, we did, Matt and I were talking on another show last night about this. And the host brought up the Romans Road and pointed out that, because I did that too when I was a kid, right? You
Oh, yeah.
memorized the Romans Road to lead people to Christ. So
Yeah.
it's verses in Romans that are taken out of context and out of order, right? So it's
Yeah.
like go Romans 8, but then jump back to 3 and then jump over to 15 and then jump over. Like, why am I leaping all over the place if it's just normal and it's right there? Or maybe you're just picking phrases that, make sense for what you've decided it should say. Yeah. Well, and again, that would be an example of one of the ways that we read Romans wrong. We also have answered a lot of questions since we wrote the book about the title, like, oh, it feels so reading Romans right, like we've got it all figured out. It's a bit tongue in cheek. Like, we're kind of saying, first of all, that number one, a lot of the people out there right now who are telling you that are misunderstanding Paul, they're the ones telling you that they're reading Paul right. They're reading Romans right.
Right. Yeah.
What we're saying is there's definitely a way to read Romans wrong. And if nothing else, we would like to present another way of reading it that I think
Yeah.
makes it make a lot more sense. Because again, when I just studied the Bible and read the Bible as an evangelical, I noticed that it seemed like Paul couldn't make up his mind. It's like he's a little schizophrenic. Like, why does he say this over here in Romans? And then he says something that seems to contradict that a little bit later. And again, if you don't know that he's doing this back and forth debate thing, right? This prosopopoeia argumentation thing, you think it's all Paul, then it's sort of like, Paul, what are you doing? Which is it? Or is it this or is it that? Make up your mind.
Yeah.
So
It's
I
like a
think it just makes it,
style.
it makes more sense what's really going on. Because
I
look, if
think,
that's not what he's doing, then
yeah,
Paul is confused and he doesn't know
then
what he's
there's a
talking about.
problem.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a problem.
exactly. That makes so much more sense. And
Yeah.
I don't know. You could, like, for me, I still have a hard time being like, I like that you guys call it reading Romans, right? Because you guys are like that. You just don't,
Yes.
you're not afraid to, I would have probably said, what if you're reading Romans wrong?
There you go.
That would
Yes.
have been me trying to be like, appealing to everyone. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's not what
Right.
I'm saying, but
Yeah.
that's just me trying to not get into an argument when I think honestly, sometimes a good argument is
Yeah.
something that's needed so that
Yes.
people can see a different side, even if they're heated when they go into it.
That's
At
right.
least they're asking.
That's right.
So kudos to you guys
Yeah.
for doing the hard thing
Well,
because I
that's
would have
also, yeah, it's also
retreated.
part of the people I mentioned, that I'm hoping we're going to get some kind of a
Yeah.
response from some of these other people. Is like that's the kind of stuff they respond to, right?
Hmm.
They would respond to something like in your face, like reading Romans right, like
Yeah. They're
suggesting
going
that
to
they're
respond to
wrong
that.
because I got to defend myself, right? And again,
Yeah.
I know this because I used to be like that. I
Same
know
here.
that's
Same
what I would
here.
like. How dare you say that I'm wrong? I'm
But if
going to prove
somebody
to you I'm
came in
right.
humility and was like, I
Yeah,
mean, what if you're reading it wrong?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it would be really hard for me to like be upset. I'd be like, dang it,
yeah.
she's so sweet, but
Right.
it's like, no, let's talk about this.
Yeah,
This is important. And, my way isn't always the right way when it comes to conflict because I've always done everything I could to
yeah,
avoid it. You know what
yeah,
I mean? I
yeah,
was a woman in evangelicalism. For crying out
yeah,
loud, you were a peacemaker. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
And sometimes, I mean, Jesus didn't create a lot of peace,
yeah, yeah. He
when people would hear what he had to say.
he
So,
provokes reactions that let you know that he was kind of poking the bear a little bit. Yeah,
yes,
and so we're okay.
exactly.
We're okay to poke the bear just a little bit with this book. Again, just because these are things that I think are really important. Like if you walk around thinking that that the book of Romans, Paul's most important letter, is right about God, that God is wrathful, that God does create people just so he can torture them for eternity, that God hates gay people, that God doesn't like women, that God wants you to pledge allegiance to the state, blind allegiance to the state, no matter what. Because that's what Romans has been used to tell people. Then this is damaging. It's hurting people. It's hurting people's relationships. It's you know, people are suffering because of this kind of teaching. And it's especially frustrating again why Matt and I wanted to write this book because it's the opposite of what Paul wanted. This is not the book he wrote. He did not write this kind of a letter. And I just feel like if Paul was alive today and he found this out, he would be so upset. Like, what
Yeah.
have you done? You've
Jesus
completely
too.
missed the point. Yes, and of
Jesus.
course, yes,
They'd all be like,
Jesus,
what are you doing?
yes,
Like my whole message was we don't need religion. You're
that's
already
right.
connected to God. What are you doing creating another one in my name?
That's
Hundreds of them, if not
yeah,
thousands.
exactly in
I
his
mean,
name.
the whole thing it's crazy, but and whether or not I'm right, and this is the thing, like, I don't care
Yeah,
if I'm like, if what I believe is the absolute, like, is this it? Because I
yeah.
don't feel like hell is in my future if I
No,
don't at this
exactly.
point.
Yeah,
But I don't know. I think there's something really beautiful about being able to go, I could be wrong, but the way I believe right now gives me peace
yeah,
and freedom, and it is for freedom that Christ set us free. And
yeah.
I just feel like I'm finally experiencing what that means. I kept wondering, where is that freedom?
Yes,
Why
I
am I
came to
not
give you
feeling it?
life and life abundantly, and I'm thinking,
Yes,
where
I
when
was
did that
not.
start?
I was terrified the whole
Yes,
time. Like my kids were going to go to hell. I was going to go to hell.
yeah,
Anybody I loved or met, if I didn't, do these things, read them the Romans road,
yeah,
tell them everything that they believed was wrong and that they needed to believe like I did. I
yeah.
just, yeah, there's so many people that I sat beside on planes that I wish I could see now and be like, I am so
I'm
sorry.
so sorry.
I
Yes, I
am so
apologize.
sorry. It was truly from a heart of love.
Yes, yeah. When I was a little kid, I was a brand new Christian. I think I was not even maybe what was I, fourth grade, fifth grade, something like this.
Yeah.
Um, and we went back home to Tennessee to visit my cousins, my family on my mom's side, and I was trying to witness to my younger cousin who was like, he was a kid, like five,
Yeah.
6 years older than me. And he was just kind of being like smart alecky to me, like, "Nyeh, nyeh, 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 nyeh." I slapped the crap out of him. And
Oh
it was like, that
no.
was my first evangelism experience. Like, yeah, maybe I'm not so good at this. Maybe,
you, you literally slapped him, not just
no,
with words, not with
no, listen.
scripture.
In fact, I slapped him so hard. The
Oh,
screen
Keith.
door to my grandmother's house was closed. We were on the front porch outside, and the doors and windows were closed. They were talking. So there's all this noise going on. I could hear them talking. When I slapped him, it got quiet and they heard that sound. And when they came out and looked, the shape of my hand in red was on his cheek. Like it was very obvious I had slapped him. I slapped the snot out of him.
I
So
bet
I
that's how people
apologize
felt
to my
with
cousin
me.
Jim. I'm so sorry.
I didn't literally slap anybody, but man,
May have wanted to.
spiritually, I had some kung fu going on.
Uh-huh.
I was really, really trying. And I was always taught if you just like end with the Bible verse, they can't argue with you.
That's right.
And
The Bible says.
the Bible's, I mean, I'm not trying to argue with
Yeah,
that,
argue with Jesus. Take it
so
up with God, not me. Yeah.
I must have been insufferable. But you know what? People are so kind. You think about like
Yeah.
how many people were just like, they just sat and then they probably like texted somebody and like, holy crap, I am sitting next to a
Right.
psychopath.
Yeah. That poor lady. I'm just gonna nod and smile. Okay. Thank you.
I
I'll
don't
think
even
about
talk
that.
to people next to me anymore because I'm like,
I
I
know.
feel like I have a lot to make up for.
Yes, exactly. I'm just gonna read my book, look out
Just
the
give me my
window.
book. You're
Yeah.
good. You don't have to even look at me. I'm set.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord, I don't need you to go to heaven with me. And
That's
it's
right.
not even because, like, I don't know. The truth is, none of us know. Nobody knows what's
Right.
next. I
Right.
just have so much faith now. My faith is so much bigger that I'm like, whatever it is, it's good.
Yeah. No,
You know?
exactly. The faith that I have, yeah, I have definitely come to a place where I embracing the mystery of God. Like I don't
Yeah.
think I've got it all figured out. Like even honestly, this book, Reading Romans, right? Like for me personally, I'm not basing my life on what Paul says in Romans or doesn't say in Romans.
Right.
I wrote the book for people, Matt and I wrote the book for people who
Hmm.
are wrestling with these kind of things. But for me personally, yeah, I've just come to a place where I don't know a lot, and I don't even say I know it, but I guess you said I have faith in
Yeah.
the idea that God is good, that God is love,
Hmm.
that I'm connected to God and always have been and always will be.
Yeah.
And whatever happens, I'll be with God.
Yeah.
And everyone I know will be. I don't have to worry
Yeah.
about any of those things because I don't
You
think
don't
it
have
comes
to,
down to
there's no
having the right.
transaction to
Yeah, yeah,
get there. Yeah.
yeah.
It's,
It's not about having the right belief systems, the right
mhm.
theology. It's not about having the right information, which I was for most of my Christian life. That's what I thought it was all about:
Yeah.
having the right doctrine, the right beliefs, the right
Yeah.
information, and realizing suddenly now being able to look and see that what Jesus says is that it's not about information; it's about transformation.
Right.
And the transformation comes from just leaning into that connection we have with God and resting in our identity as someone made in the image of God, and God is love. Like that's good enough for me. Jesus
Right.
simplified it even more. Like the two most important things: love God and love others. That's it.
Period. I
That's
bet
it.
he said that. I bet
Yeah.
he did.
Drop the mic. Yep.
Period. Now
Period.
go and do likewise.
That's right.
Well, I'm excited about this book. I think it's gonna, I hope it'll make some waves and,
Yeah.
just think. Like, and that's the beauty of it. Like, whatever you, like, even just having people here on my podcast and hearing their journeys, and some of them are very different than mine. And, like, for instance, Mary Terhune, I just had her
I
on
love
the
Mary.
podcast.
Yeah.
Love her. Oh my gosh. But her experience of a spiritual awakening was so different than mine.
Yes.
But the cool thing that we realized is that we both ended up in the same place.
Yes.
Seeing God as love, knowing
Yeah.
that we're all connected, that we
Yeah.
love each other, and that's what this is about, like learning the beauty and incredibleness of if we could just realize that. I mean, even Jesus said it himself, you know, you we could do even greater things than he did.
That's right.
And yet we just don't. We don't get it. It's always
Yeah.
about I'm right, you're wrong, instead of what if I'm wrong?
Yeah. That's right.
And
That's right. Yeah. Or what if it doesn't matter if I'm right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
not
And
about
what
being right. Yeah.
yeah, I think does your being right lead to freedom?
There you go.
That's a
Yeah.
good question to ask someone. Does
That
your
is a
being
really
right
good
lead to
question.
freedom? Because it didn't for me when I was believing
Right.
those things that took so much of me. Like I had to do so many things in order to have this result. And it was never about what's going on now. It was always about what's next in heaven.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you
In the
lose,
future.
yeah,
Yeah.
you lose like the beauty of enjoying the journey right now.
Hmm.
And you're just focusing on the next one that you're not even sure about. Like we don't even know.
Yeah. No one knows. Yeah. Even
Yeah.
honestly, the Bible is very, very vague
Yes.
about what happens after we die. So a friend of mine once was going to write an article about everything the Bible says about what happens after we die. And I said, that's going to be a short article
Yeah, there's
because
nothing
it
in
really
there.
doesn't say anything. The most you get is like Paul says, it's like seeing through a glass darkly.
Yeah.
One day face to face, right? But
Yeah.
we don't know. No one knows, right?
Absent with the
Um,
body, present with the Lord.
that's right. That's it.
That's it.
Beyond that, can't say.
Yeah.
And if it was important, I think maybe they would have told us. But since we're
I
not
think
told, I
what's
think
more
it
important
doesn't
is how
matter.
we live here. I
That's
think
exactly
it's
right.
more important how we live here. And
That's
I
right.
think that was the whole message of Jesus was like, hey guys, the kingdom is here.
That's right. The
It's
Sermon on the
among you,
Mount,
it's
like
in
you're saying,
you.
yeah, it's the Sermon on the Mount is all about the kingdom of God is here now. The kingdom of God is within you
Yeah.
and me, and so it's what happens now that matters, and
Mhm.
us that matters. Yeah,
And the rest of
exactly.
it is it's so, like, it doesn't matter so much that it doesn't even really, the Bible doesn't even really talk about
That's
it.
right. Yeah,
The only thing that I need to know is that I believe it's going to be good, whatever it
yeah,
is.
yeah,
And I feel like what I'm learning in this life will carry on and carry over into whatever's next.
yeah. I agree. Yeah,
So, well, thank you for gracing us with your amazing presence again. This was fun. I wish Matthew could have been here.
yeah,
He was supposed to, but he had other things he had to get done today, and I totally get that. My life is
yeah.
always
He's doing
a
the hard work
deadline.
while I do the
Yeah, yeah,
interview.
yeah. You get to have the fun one.
Yeah,
He does the creative stuff.
yeah.
No, it's good. I'm excited for your book. And listen, if you're listening and this has intrigued you, if you like this kind of stuff, there's a book called Reading Romans Right. And, I think you need to pick it up and there's a link. You don't even have to really do much. Just go to the show notes and just click. And there,
Yeah,
boom, you'll be able to get right to it. So,
awesome.
Keith, thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. It was a great conversation, and I'm so grateful I got to come back on and talk with you again.